Obinna stood outside the large black gate, dressed in a simple shirt and trousers, holding a file tightly in his hands. His palms were sweaty, not from the sun, but from the shame. He could hear laughter from inside the compound. His uncles, cousins, and half-brothers were all inside, gathered for the inheritance meeting, the same meeting he had been told not to attend. "Obinna, go back to wherever you came from," his stepmother had said over the phone the night before. "You were never really part of this family." His heart had dropped when he heard those words. He had known they didn't like him. His father had married his mother when he was young, but after she passed, everything changed. His father remarried, and suddenly, Obinna was treated like a visitor in his own home. Now that his father was dead, the rest of the family saw their chance. They told him he had no right to the house, no right to the business, and no right to even be there. So they planned the meeting without him. He wasn't invited, but he showed up anyway, quietly, standing by the gate, hoping someone would at least let him listen. He waited, swallowing his pride. Just then, a black car pulled up. A man in a neat grey suit stepped out, holding a brown leather bag. He walked past Obinna without a word, only stopping briefly to glance at him. "Are you Obinna?" the man asked. Obinna nodded, unsure who he was. "I'm Barrister Chuka, your father's lawyer." Obinna's eyes widened. The man opened his bag, pulled out an envelope and handed it to him. "Your father signed this a week before he died. I came to deliver it personally as instructed." Obinna took the envelope with shaking hands. His name was written clearly on the front. For a second he couldn't breathe. He looked up at the lawyer. "They said I shouldn't come in," he said quietly. The lawyer looked at him carefully. "I know, but they don't get to decide that. This document changes everything." From inside the compound, voices rose in argument. Someone was shouting Obinna's name angrily, but at that moment, Obinna didn't care. He opened the envelope slowly, and what he read inside made his legs weak. His father had left something just for him, something official, something signed and witnessed. And it wasn't small. Obinna closed his eyes. They had tried to erase him, but his father hadn't forgotten. Obinna grew up in a small 3-bedroom house in Enugu. His early years were happy. His mother, Ifeoma, was kind, hard-working, and always made sure he felt loved. She taught him to greet elders with respect and to never lie. His father, Mr. Nduka, was a businessman who owned a successful car parts store. Though he was often busy, he made time to help Obinna with schoolwork or take him out for roasted corn on weekends. But when Obinna was 9, everything changed. His mother got sick, the hospital visits became frequent, and Obinna started hearing words like cancer and chemo. A year later, she passed. That was the first time Obinna felt true pain. He cried so hard that day, his chest ached for hours. He didn't understand how the world could keep moving when his mother was gone. After the funeral, life got quiet. His father changed. He became distant. The house felt colder. A year later, Mr. Nduka brought home a woman named Clara. She smiled at first and gave Obinna sweets. But soon, her true self came out. She didn't hit him, but her words cut deeper. "You're not even mine," she would say with a fake smile. "You should be grateful you're even eating in this house." 2 years later, Clara had a son, then another. Obinna suddenly had half-brothers, and the little attention he used to get disappeared. He became the house help, washing plates, cleaning floors, and always being blamed if something went wrong. If his brothers fought, he got punished. If food went missing, he was the thief. Obinna learned to stay silent. He focused on school. He read late into the night, using a small torchlight under his bedsheet. He studied hard, got good grades, and hoped one day he would leave that house for good. His father never defended him. Sometimes he'd say, "Just ignore her, Obinna," but he never stopped her. Obinna slowly stopped calling him Papa and started calling him Sir. Years passed. Obinna finished secondary school and got a scholarship to study engineering at a university in Lagos. He didn't tell anyone when he left. He packed his bag quietly, boarded a bus, and left that house behind. At university, things weren't easy, but he worked part-time at a small garage and stayed focused. He didn't party, he didn't drink. He just wanted to build a life where no one could treat him like trash. He tried not to think about his father's house, but sometimes, on hard days, the memories came back. The look of disgust on Clara's face, the smirks from his brothers, the silence of his father. Then one day, during his final year, he got a phone call. It was Clara. "Your father is sick," she said, "but don't come. We don't want confusion." Obinna didn't reply. He ended the call and stared at his phone for a long time. A few weeks later, another call came. This time, it was from one of the extended family members. "Obinna, your father passed away yesterday," the voice said. The next day, he traveled home for the burial. When he arrived, no one greeted him. His name wasn't on the program. He stood at the back of the crowd, watching strangers say goodbye to a man who never truly defended him. No one handed him food. No one asked if he had a place to sleep. After the burial, Clara came up to him. "You don't need to return for the inheritance meeting," she said with a sharp voice. "There's nothing for you." Obinna didn't argue. He just nodded and walked away. Back in Lagos, he didn't know what to feel. His father was gone. The man who let him suffer was gone. And yet, he still felt a deep emptiness. There were things he wished he had said, questions he wished he had asked. 2 weeks later, he got a call from a man named Barrister Chuka. The lawyer said he wanted to meet Obinna in person. He didn't explain why. Now, standing in front of that same black gate where he had grown up, Obinna felt both fear and hope. He hadn't come to fight. He just wanted to see if his father had remembered him in the end. Inside, he could hear laughter, Clara's laughter, his brother's laughter, all of them thinking they had won. But as he held the envelope the lawyer handed him, his fingers trembling, he realized something. He was not the boy they once pushed around. He was a man now, and whatever was in that envelope was going to change everything. Obinna sat at a quiet corner in a small restaurant, the document open on the table in front of him. His eyes scanned the lines again and again. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. His father had written a letter attached to a legal will. It clearly stated that Obinna was to inherit 40% of the family business, along with a small house in Enugu and a sum of money kept in a separate bank account. But that wasn't the shocking part. The letter spoke of regret. "My son, I failed you. I should have protected you. I saw everything, but I was too weak to stop it. This is my way of trying to make it right. Please forgive me." Obinna wiped his eyes with his sleeve. He wasn't sure if it was forgiveness he felt, but something inside him shifted. For the first time, he didn't feel invisible. He felt seen. But the moment didn't last long. Later that same day, Barrister Chuka called him. "They are refusing to recognize the document," he said. "Clara says you forged it." Obinna felt heat rise in his chest. "What? They are saying you tricked me. They want the will thrown out." Obinna didn't say anything for a few seconds. He stared at the cars passing by outside the window. The streets looked the same, but his world was shifting again. "I need to come there," he finally said. When he returned to the family compound 2 days later, the gate was locked. He knocked. A guard peeped out and shook his head. "Madam said you are not allowed in. Tell her I'm not here to fight. I just want to talk." The man disappeared inside. After 5 long minutes, the gate opened. Clara stood with her arms folded. Her expression was cold. "You are wasting your time," she said. "That lawyer is confused. Your father was sick. He didn't know what he was signing." Obinna held up the will. "This was signed with witnesses. His doctor confirmed he was mentally fit. This is legal." She snatched the document from his hand, glanced through it, then tore it in two. "I don't care," she said. "You think this will change anything? You think a piece of paper will make you my equal?" Obinna stood in silence. The ripped pages fluttered to the ground like broken feathers. "You were never one of us," she said with venom. "You were your mother's mistake, and she died, remember? She left you behind." Obinna clenched his fists, but he didn't speak. From behind Clara, his half-brother Amecha appeared. He had grown tall and muscular, and he wore their father's wristwatch like a trophy. "Still trying to steal from us, Obinna," Amecha said. "You're pathetic." Obinna turned to leave, but as he reached the gate, he paused. Something inside him had changed. He wasn't just walking away this time. He went straight back to Barrister Chuka's office. "I want to fight this," he said. "I want to take it to court." The lawyer looked at him for a moment, surprised. "Are you sure?" "Yes. They think I'm nothing. I need to show them I'm not." The lawyer nodded slowly. "Then we begin now. We'll file for a legal hearing. It won't be easy. They will try to destroy your name." Obinna nodded. "Let them try." That same week, news spread through the community. People began whispering about the will. Some said Obinna forged it. Others believed the father finally made things right. Then one day, something unexpected happened. An old man knocked on Obinna's door in Lagos. He introduced himself as Chief Eken, one of his father's oldest friends. "I was one of the witnesses when your father signed that will," he said. "I was there." He cried that day. Obinna invited him in. He said he couldn't leave this world without fixing what he had done to you, the man said softly. He told me he didn't trust Clara. That's why he didn't tell the rest of the family. He gave a copy to the lawyer and asked me to keep the second. The old man reached into his bag and pulled out a sealed document. Here, this is the second copy of the will, signed, sealed, and dated. Obinna stared at it with wide eyes. His hands trembled as he received it. Thank you, he whispered. You deserve better, Chief Akane said. Go and take what is yours. This was the moment everything shifted. Obinna wasn't just reacting anymore. He was ready to act. The next day, with both the original and backup documents in hand, he walked into the courtroom with Barrister Chuka beside him. Clara and her sons were already there, dressed in fine clothes, surrounded by expensive lawyers. But Obinna stood tall. He was no longer a shadow. He was ready to fight. And this time, he had proof. The courtroom was silent as the judge read through the documents. Obinna sat at the front, his heart pounding in his chest. He had never been inside a court before. Everything felt strange. The long robes, the cold air, the serious faces. But he was not afraid. Clara sat across from him, looking confident, but her eyes narrowed when the second copy of the will was shown. Her lawyers tried to argue that it was fake, that the witness was lying, that Obinna planned the whole thing. But Chief Akane stood firm. I was there, he said in a strong voice. I watched Nduka sign it. He was clear, calm, and serious. Clara's lawyer questioned him. Why didn't you come forward earlier? Because I was afraid, Chief Akane said. Afraid of this family's power. That one sentence changed the mood in the room. People began to look at Clara differently. Obinna noticed it. After the hearing, Clara stormed out of the courtroom. You think you've won, don't you? She said, her voice shaking with anger. This is just the beginning. Obinna didn't answer. That night, his phone started ringing non-stop. Unknown numbers, some silent calls. Some people telling him to drop the case. One message said, if you know what's good for you, walk away. He felt fear crawling back into his chest, but he pushed it down. He had come too far to stop now. A few days later, someone broke into his small apartment. They didn't take anything. They just scattered his papers, tore his clothes, and wrote on the wall in red marker, "You don't belong." Obinna called the police, but nothing happened. No one was caught. He knew it was a warning. Barrister Chuka advised him to stay at a friend's place for a while. Obinna moved in with his classmate, Kunle, who gave him a mattress on the floor. You sure you want to keep going? Kunle asked one night. These people don't play fair. I'm tired of being scared, Obinna said. They've taken too much from me already. The next court date arrived. Clara now had a new trick. She brought in a doctor who claimed Mr. Nduka was mentally weak before his death. But Obinna's side responded with another witness, a nurse from the hospital who remembered Obinna's father clearly. He used to ask about his son every day, she said. He regretted not doing more for him. As the case dragged on, Obinna's family turned against him completely. His uncles, who used to give him small money during holidays, now ignored his calls. Some even spread lies, saying Obinna was trying to disgrace his late father. They said he was greedy. One day, in the middle of town, he met his younger half-brother Jide. Jide walked past him like he didn't exist. Then he turned and said, "You think this makes you our brother? You're not." That sentence hit Obinna deep. He stood there in the hot sun, feeling like a ghost. Even when he tried to stand up for himself, he was still unwanted. But things only got worse. Barrister Chuka called him urgently one afternoon. Clara filed a new document, he said. She's claiming your mother was never married to your father. She says you're not a legal child. Obinna's mouth went dry. That's a lie. I know, the lawyer said, but we need proof. Obinna traveled to his village the next day. He met with the oldest man in the community, his mother's uncle. The man remembered the wedding clearly. I was there when your father paid her bride price, he said. Together they went to find old photos, documents, anything that could help. After hours of searching through boxes, they found an old marriage certificate. It was yellow with age, but it was clear. His parents were legally married. Obinna returned to the city and handed the document to Chuka. Let's finish this, he said. Meanwhile, Clara began telling people that Obinna was doing juju, using charms to win the case. Some believed her. People began avoiding Obinna on the street. Even some of his old classmates stopped replying to his messages. He felt more alone than ever. But each time he wanted to give up, he remembered his mother's voice. She used to tell him, "Never allow people to decide your worth. You are enough." That voice kept him going. At the next hearing, Clara's lies began to fall apart. The judge asked serious questions. Why would a man leave 40% of his business to someone who wasn't his child? Why were there two separate copies of the will, both with matching signatures? Clara couldn't answer. Obinna looked across the room at his stepmother. For the first time, he saw something new in her eyes. Not anger, not pride, fear. The court adjourned again, and the final judgment was set for the next week. Obinna left the court quietly that day, but something heavy sat on his chest. He had fought for weeks. He had been insulted, threatened, ignored, and made to feel like nothing. But now, he was standing on the edge of truth. He went back to Kunle's house and sat alone on the mattress. Tears rolled down his face. Not from Essie. The day of the final judgment came. The courtroom was full. More people than before came to watch. Neighbors, distant family, even some people who had once laughed behind Obinna's back. Everyone wanted to know what would happen. Obinna sat in the front row with Barrister Chuka. His hands were shaking, but his face stayed calm. He had come too far to break now. Clara arrived late, wearing black glasses and holding her head high. Her sons followed behind her. They acted like nothing could touch them, but deep inside, they were not as confident as before. The judge entered. Everyone stood, then silence. The judge began to read slowly through the case details. How Obinna had been raised, how he was pushed aside, how the will had been hidden, and how false stories were brought forward to stop him. Obinna listened to every word. It felt like someone was finally telling his truth. Then the judge paused. He looked directly at Clara. This court finds that the documents submitted by the late Mr. Nduka are valid, he said clearly. Both copies of the will match in content and signature. The witnesses have been honest. The attempt to deny the marriage between Mr. Nduka and Obinna's mother was false and disrespectful. Clara shifted uncomfortably in her seat. The judge continued. This court also finds that threats and lies were used to stop Obinna from receiving what his father left for him. That is unacceptable. Obinna's heart was racing. He felt something big coming. Then the judge gave his final words. Therefore, the court declares that Obinna is legally entitled to 40% of his father's business, the house located in Enugu, and the funds as stated in the will. This ruling is final. Gasps filled the room. Obinna sat still, stunned. It was over. He had won. But that wasn't the twist. As people started whispering, the judge raised his hand again. There's one more matter, he said. A letter was found inside the second will, written by Mr. Nduka to his family. He held up a folded letter and began to read. To my family, I know I will not be there when you read this, but I need to say a few things. To my wife Clara, what you did to Obinna over the years, I saw it all. I was weak. I didn't stop you. That is my biggest failure as a father. To my sons, Amecha and Jide, you were raised in comfort, but not in truth. You treated your brother like a stranger. That is not how family should behave. And to my first son, Obinna, if you are reading this, then I hope the world has finally heard your voice. You were always strong, even when I was not. I hope you forgive me one day. Everything I built, I owe to your mother. She stood by me when I had nothing. That is why I left you what I did. Protect it, use it well, and never forget your worth. Your father, Nduka. The courtroom went quiet again. Everyone sat still. Clara's hands trembled. She looked down at the floor. Obinna blinked slowly. He didn't cry, not this time. He just breathed deeply and nodded. His father's words had come too late, but they mattered. Outside the courtroom, reporters gathered. People wanted to take pictures, ask questions, but Obinna didn't stop. He walked straight to his late father's office, where he had not been allowed to enter for years. When he opened the door, dust floated in the air. The chair was still there, the desk, the old framed photo of his father and mother from years ago. He picked it up and stared at it for a long time. Behind him, someone entered the room. It was Amecha. What do you want? Obinna asked without turning. Amecha didn't speak for a few seconds. I didn't think you'd win, he said quietly. No one did. Obinna placed the photo gently on the table. I didn't come to fight, he said, but I couldn't let you erase me. Amecha sighed. It's yours now. Everything. No, Obinna replied. Only my part. I don't want yours. Amecha walked out without another word. Later that night, Obinna sat outside alone. The stars were bright. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel like an outsider. He felt peace. Kunle called him. You did it, bro. I saw it on the news. Obinna smiled. Yeah, I guess I did. He looked up at the sky and whispered, "Mama, I did it." The fight was over, but something even bigger had been restored. His name, his story, and his place in the world. Obinna stood outside the courtroom, feeling like a new man. The people who once looked down on him now whispered among themselves. For so long, he had been treated like he didn't matter, like his voice was nothing. But now, everyone knew who he was. Everyone saw him as more than just the forgotten son. Clara and her sons were gone. The judge's ruling had crushed their pride. Amecha had tried to speak with Obinna after the court session, but he didn't want to hear it. Obinna didn't need their approval anymore. He didn't need to prove anything to anyone. He spent the following days sorting through everything his father had left behind. The business, the property, the accounts. It wasn't just about the money. It was about finally having a place in his father's world. His father had given him the chance to prove himself, even if it had taken years for the truth to come to light. The family house in Enugu had been sold, but Obinna didn't mind. He didn't want to stay where so many painful memories had been built. He moved into a smaller, quieter apartment in Lagos. It wasn't as big as the house he grew up in, but it was his. The peace it brought him was worth more than any luxury. He found himself starting fresh, taking on projects at the family business, but on his own terms. Barrister Chuka helped him, guiding him through the legal parts. Obinna wasn't just a son anymore. He was a man with power, a man who deserved to be there. His hands shook sometimes when he signed documents, but they were no longer filled with fear. But even as things were changing, there was still a part of Obinna that felt the weight of his past. He thought of his mother often, of how she had always been his strength. She had passed away years ago, but her lessons stayed with him. He thought about how much she had loved his father, and how everything they had built had been torn apart by lies and greed. Obinna learned to forgive, but not forget. He couldn't forget how Clara had pushed him away, how Amecha had treated him like an outsider. He couldn't forget how he had been left to fight alone for so long. One afternoon, Kunle came to visit him. They sat on the balcony of his new apartment, overlooking the busy city. Kunle was smiling, but Obinna could tell that his friend was concerned. "Bro, how do you feel now?" Kunle asked. Obinna leaned back in his chair, staring out at the horizon. "I feel free," he said softly. "For the first time, I don't feel like I'm fighting against the world. I'm fighting for myself." Kunle nodded. "You've earned it, man." Obinna thought about that. Had he really earned it? Or had he just been lucky that the truth came out in time? The truth had been buried for so long. But now, the world knew who he was. His name was finally his. But sometimes, it felt lonely. His family had torn apart. The people he thought would always be there had turned their backs on him. Amecha was still angry, still bitter. Clara had not changed. She had lost everything, and it had cost her her family. Obinna wondered if she ever regretted the things she did. His phone rang, and it was Barrister Chuka. "Obinna," Chuka said, his voice serious. "I've just received a letter from your father's lawyer. There's something else we need to discuss. It's about your share in the business." Obinna's heart sank. He had already been given what was rightfully his. What else could there be? He met Chuka the next day, and the lawyer handed him the letter. It was another will, but this one wasn't like the others. It was a personal letter, written directly to Obinna. "I know I cannot undo what has been done," the letter began, "but I hope this brings you some peace." Obinna opened it carefully, his fingers trembling. "Obinna, you were always the son I could count on. You were the strength that kept me grounded, even when I didn't show it. I didn't fight for you the way I should have. I failed you. But this business, this empire I built, it was always meant to be yours. You were always meant to lead it. I know now that I didn't prepare you for what would come, but you are more than capable. You have always been more than capable." The words hit Obinna like a wave. His father had failed him, yes, but in the end, he had known what Obinna could do. He had believed in him. Obinna sat in silence for a long time after reading the letter. He felt a mix of emotions, anger, sadness, but also relief. His father had finally given him his place, even in death, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough. It was then that Obinna understood. His father had made mistakes. Clara had made mistakes. But it wasn't up to them to define who he was. He had to define himself. Obinna decided to make changes to the business. He didn't want to just carry on what his father had started. He wanted to create something that reflected who he was, his values, his vision, and his belief in fairness. He wasn't going to let the toxic environment that had ruled the be. Obinna walked into the small, quiet cemetery where his mother was buried. The sky was grey, and the wind was gentle. He hadn't been here in a long time. So much had happened, and now It felt right to come back. He carried a single white flower in his hand. When he reached the grave, he knelt down slowly and placed the flower on the ground. "Mama," he said softly, "I did it." His voice shook, but he didn't cry. He felt peace in his chest, something he hadn't felt for years. He thought about the nights he had gone to bed hungry, the times he had been called names, and the years he had been treated like he didn't matter. But now, he had proved them all wrong. He took out a small note from his pocket. It was the letter his father had written to him, the one where he finally said he was proud. Obinna placed it beside the flower. "I forgive him," he whispered, "not for him, but for me." He sat there for a while, just listening to the wind. There were no more fights, no more courts, no more shouting, just silence. He stood up slowly and looked around. Life was still moving. Cars passed by in the distance. Birds flew across the sky. People were living, and so would he. Obinna walked back to his car. As he got in and started the engine, he looked at himself in the rear-view mirror. He didn't see the scared boy anymore. He saw a man who had taken back his name, his voice, and his place in the world. He smiled quietly to himself. Then he drove off, toward whatever came next. Stronger, wiser, free.